Hello, everyone, and welcome to another session with Rights and Responsibilities Awareness Initiative. Today, we have Ernest Johnson, mental health expert, to talk to us about autism.
Yes,
Ernest, thank you so much for being here today with us.
thank you. And I feel a great degree of passion for mental health issues and presentations. And it's an honor to be here to speak to you about this because these are things that I'm deeply passionate and concerned about. And I love to provide this information.
Thank you so much, sir. So, what you can tell us about autism?
But autism, well, like many other conditions, autism is something that is relatively poorly understood. However, there are improvements in the last I want to say like 10 years or so in terms of how it's understood. There's more diagnosis than there has been historically, not because there's more cases, but I think as a whole, social service providers, schools, medical and mental health practitioners are better at catching it. Um, and it's kind of a misnomer that there's more autism. It's no, we just have more accurate diagnostics and more aware service providers. Um, and there's a few and there's kind of some of the media portrayals of autism are such that there's an expectation that everyone's Rain Man, and that's not quite the case. So autism is referred to as autism spectrum disorder. The reason why it's called that is because it encompasses a wide variety of um, conditions that there is a spectrum of manifests and a spectrum of impacts. And there are some individuals with autism who it's well, autism in and itself is very invisible. There's not necessarily physical manifests um, that are very immediately detectable. Um, and someone with autism spectrum disorder could have something that historically would have been deemed Asperger's syndrome, which would include some social awkwardness and difficulty reading social cues, but generally high functioning and able to function in society without significant intervention. Um, and then there's more pervasive conditions such as childhood degenerative disorder, where individuals with this disorder which is under the umbrella of autism spectrum disorder, will essentially hit developmental milestones and then seemingly go backwards in those milestones, in particular around language and social engagement. Um, so it's called autism spectrum disorder, again, because there's a wide range of manifests and a wide range of effects that all can be captured under the autism spectrum label. Um, Now, historically, or rather, um, currently, individuals with autism symptoms can be caught as early as not even a year old. Um, and then, although it's very rare to catch them this early, because as a caregiver for an infant, you're not necessarily attuned to the cues or even looking for the cues. And then um, retrospectively, one can look at certain behaviors with that knowledge and be like, that was kind of a sign of autism. Most diagnoses occur from about the age of 4 to 7 because it becomes very apparent when young children are beginning their academic journey. The symptoms become increasingly apparent. And historically, children with autism would have been deemed special needs to the point of not being able to be in a mainstream classroom, or special needs to the point of um, having a significant delay, which isn't necessarily the case. Individuals with autism can range um, in IQ scores, and actually, individuals on the autism spectrum, the general IQ is actually about 7 or so points higher than the general population. So um, there is a correlation between actually higher levels of intelligence and autism. Now, there's no cure, and the cause is relatively unknown. But appropriate tools and treatment can really help adults and children with autism. Now, what are the symptoms? Well, there are some relatively known symptoms. Reduced eye contact, a lack of response to individual questions or um, individual eh, authority figures or caring figures interacting with an individual. Um, And then in children in particular, children with autism may seem to develop normally for 2 to 3 years, and then all of a sudden become very withdrawn or even aggressive. Um, and that relates to some of the developmental challenges associated with autism. Um, Now, children with autism can have some learning difficulties, which is interpreted as lower intelligence. However, as stated, that's not necessarily the case. Um, the main challenge associated with young children learning with autism is associated with communication and pragmatic, practical applications of knowledge. However, autism in and of itself is very diverse, so sometimes diagnostics can be relatively difficult. Now, one of the main manifests of autism is difficulty in social communication and interaction. At times, children or adults with autism will fail to respond um, to their name and appear as if, without any other sort of outside explanation as to why, appear not to hear someone. Let's say we know someone named Robert with autism. He could be across the room. I'd be like, Robert, and they'll appear not to hear me, even though there's no discernible reason as to why he wouldn't have heard me. Um, People with autism tend to be adverse to um, caring or physical touch in general, even physical touch like a parent hugging a child or touching the top of the head of a child is to kind of pat them or what have you. Children with autism would be inordinately adverse to such touching. Poor eye contact and a very flat facial expression. People with autism tend to have that. Um, Individuals with autism also tend to have delayed or impacted speech. Some individuals with autism can have some degree of mutism even, and individuals with autism also tend to speak in a fashion that is not does not have inflection. It does not have a lot of the paraverbal cues of pace and volume and tone, and tends to come off as almost robotic. Individuals with autism tend to talk in a very flat, consistent manner, even if they're expressing. I can't do I don't have autism, so there's only so far I can do with that. But there's a flat, non-inflected tone that individuals with autism can have. Starting conversations or keeping one going um, is very challenging for people with autism. There tends to be very literal engagements. Tend to be more close-ended conversations and binarial questions that are not at all open-ended. Um, and there are words and phrases that can be repeated for people with autism that may have contextual meaning that would be hard to describe unless you know the individual with autism very intimately, be it a romantic partner or be it a business associate or friend that you engage with a lot. A phrase that might not bear any sort of sequitous relationship to what was already said might be repeated like, hey, what about the lamp? And you could be driving down the road and without a very specific conversational context, that might seem as a non sequitur. Um, let's see, I'm scrolling through my notes here. Sometimes simple conversation can be very, very difficult for individuals with autism. Um, and then expressions of emotion as well, or awareness of the emotions of others, or engagement with the emotions of others um, is very difficult. For a lot of people with autism, because of this challenge in reading social cues, emotions almost seem binarial. In other words, a individual with autism might not pick on social cues that a third party, is irritated with something and continue to engage in a way that is irritating or when someone just doesn't want to engage. And for the individual with autism, it will seem as if the individual they're talking to goes from 0 to 60 and explodes. Never mind that the third party might have given all these social cues that for people who are neurotypical would be clear cues to like, kind of give some space. Um, there are also present difficulties in reading non-verbal cues and reading facial expressions, postures, tone of voice, is similar to the point that was already discussed. Individuals with autism can and often do perform repetitive movements, rocking, spinning, hand gestures, finger tapping, what have you. That can be known as stimming, and it is a way to aid in cognition and a way to aid in coping for individuals with autism. Um, Now, individuals with autism can engage in self-harmful activities when overwhelmed or overstimulated. Biting and headbanging are relatively common with young people who maybe have autism and have not learned other ways to self-regulate that are not injurious. Um, Also, individuals with autism are very much tied to routine, and any sort of divergence from the routine can be a highly, highly stressful event. And the degree of sensitivity to divergence is significantly higher than for individuals without autism. Also, autism is very much correlated with gross motor delays or gross motor challenges. So clunky, odd physical movements, um, clumsiness, walking into objects, having odd gaits or odd behaviors, such as walking on your toes, on your tiptoes all of the time, or stiff and exaggerated body language are all features that can be common for individuals with autism. Um, there are oftentimes fascination with mechanical elements outside of the context. So, like a child with autism could look at the spinning wheels of a car, but not necessarily immediately realize the spinning wheels on the car so that it can move. There are also differentials in sensitivities to light, sound, or touch, and also have different thresholds for pain. In other words, someone with autism might be very much off-put by differentials in light from one room to another, but at the same time have a tack in their shoe and may not even register that that's a big deal or something to be addressed immediately. Imaginative play or imaginative engagement is very difficult sometimes for people with autism. And perhaps most challenging for children with autism, and this certainly carries through to adulthood, are very specific food preferences and a high degree of sensitivity towards food textures. Um, in terms of children with autism, um, unless they are exposed to the right foods, they will choose to not eat versus eating if their only food choices are ones that are adverse to them texturally or temperature wise or taste wise. And for some individuals, this is highly unique. This is highly variable in the sense that there's cultural and physical location elements related to food, and it will vary in terms of what foods children are exposed to, but there will be a degree of sensitivity, especially to texture, relative to people that might have the same cultural and physical location exposures to food. Um, Now, it is important to note there is a range in individuals with autism um, are very diverse, and these are just general features. The truth is that um, it is a spectrum, and people have manifests that are very different. Now, causes. The known cause is not really known. There are features related to um, pollutants, in particular lead, in utero, and certain medications and complications during pregnancy are correlated very strongly with autism. However, it is not seen as a direct cause. And then there's a genetic factor. Their close family members, parents, siblings, grandparents, aunts, uncles, etc., with autism is highly, highly correlated with individuals having autism. Now, it has become part of the cultural zeitgeist yet again that vaccines and autism are related. They are not. There is precisely zero conclusive studies that link vaccines and autism. And there was one study by a doctor in Europe that was thoroughly debunked as a scheme to get people to prescribed to his type of medication. He was trying to sell his own product, and he actually lost his medical license over it. There is no link between vaccines and autism. And frankly, and this is going to be self-disclosure, one of my sons has autism, and he's a gentle, kind soul who's motivated to do what he's doing. And frankly, there is tons of information that vaccines save lives and zero information that autism is related to vaccines. And the notion that A, some people are choosing not to vaccinate at the threat of autism is very offensive to me, because I'd rather have my living son with autism than a dead son without, even if there was a link between autism and vaccines, and there isn't one. But I digress. Now, there are some other pieces. Boys are more likely to have autism than girls. However, girls with autism tend to be a lot more poorly diagnosed and tend to not have as strong outcomes. Girls with autism tend not to receive services and such as well. And also, children who are born extremely premature prior to 26 weeks have a higher rate of autism than the wider population. Now, something that is not often pointed out with neurodivergencies, it's kind of like being left-handed. It's just a different way of being. It is not a pathology. It's not something that is a failing of the individual or a failing of their parents or society. Just some people have autism. And in many Eastern and indigenous philosophies, that differential in social engagement and engagement with the world is deemed as a gift. And individuals with autism tend to have an extreme ability to focus on certain subjects, although not all people, and it'd be unfair to expect a savantism out of individuals with autism. But that focus with a differential engagement, very algorithmic thinking about looking at patterns in a way that people without autism are very challenged to do, can be a gift. Things that appeal to people with autism in general include architecture, mathematics, music, physical sciences, physics, astronomy, things that are related to patterns and relationships that are very algorithmic. And frankly, the ability to engage in these fashions is a gift to wider society. And I certainly subscribe to the notion that people have something to offer that is very helpful to wider society. Now, socially, people with autism tend to have more challenges in school, especially in grades 1 to 4, and positive learning outcomes. And that is a product of not having the right inputs to engage with academics and not having the right supports. Once those are in place, individuals with autism can do very, very well. Similar with employment, it is an uphill fight for many people with autism to be employed in a lot of ways. Independence and social isolation are challenges. It's harder to make friends. It's harder to function in a way without help with certain cues. And then frankly, individuals with autism related to standing out as different and related to being physically awkward with a lack of facial cues are very, very likely to be bullied. And in fact, towards incidences in which individuals are suspended from school in academics for bullying, the targets are disproportionately, the targeted population for that behavior is disproportionately individuals with autism. And then adults, individuals with autism are more likely to experience violent crime, assaults, etc., than the wider population. Now, there's no way to prevent autism, and it's really a matter of recognizing it and providing the right supports. There's no known way to present it, and frankly, it's a part of the human condition. It'd be like trying to prevent left-handedness. People are just left-handed. It's a matter of having flexibility and understanding that not everyone's the same, and people have every right to fit into the world however they present. And that's what I have to say about autism.
Thank you so much, Ernest, for this fruitful, informative presentation. So I know you are not a doctor, but in terms of treatment, is there any sort of treatment that could reduce or maybe eliminate autism according to your best knowledge?
In autism itself, absolutely not. Autism is just a way that people are. It'd be like trying to cure being below 6 feet tall. Some people are below 6 feet tall, some people are over. It's the way it is. Um, you can provide certain coaching and certain treatments that make individuals with autism have a wider tool set to navigate the world, be it behavioral coaching, be it life coaching, be it CBT. But you cannot treat autism out of an individual. It's simply how they engage with the world and how they filter the world around them. So it's not putting, there's no medication you can take that will make autism go away. It simply does not happen.
Well, sir, at the end of this presentation, I would like to express my sincere thanks to you and for all of this information and experience that you have shared with us. Thank you so much, Ernest. We are so grateful.
I am very honored to have the opportunity to speak, and I believe what I speak on is very important, and I have a lot of passion for it. So thank you for having me. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you. Thank you so much. And for all of us who's watching, thank you so much for being here with us today. As always, stay well, stay safe, and we are looking forward to see you at another session with Rights and Responsibilities Awareness Initiative. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.